I absolutely am of the view, and we as an organization are of the view, that climate change is now undeniably the defining challenge of our time. And as we have said repeatedly, we are committed to playing our part in working out solutions that help manage the impacts of climate change. For Scope 1 and Scope 2, we have a target of reducing our emissions by 30% against a 2016 baseline by 2030. And on our way then to achieving full carbon neutrality across the whole of the portfolio by 2040. So you'll be familiar now with that chart on the left-hand side, which gives you a very clear indication as to how we expect the emissions profile to evolve over that period of time, those two distinct periods of time. We always said that over time we would fill the detail in of achieving our reduction targets, and there have been a couple of developments since we updated you in April of this year. The first one I spoke about at length during our results presentation at the half, which is, of course, the launch of NewGen and the first motion of our zero emissions haulage solution. That work continues to progress and is going well. The new news is the creation of Envusa Energy, which is a joint venture company that we now have with EDF Renewables, and we will bring others on board with that as well. And we're setting that up to produce the renewable energy that we need to decarbonize our Southern African operations. For Scope 3, we do have an ambition to reduce our Scope 3 emissions by 50% by 2040, and that is from a baseline that we measured in 2020. This month, we signed a memorandum of understanding with a long-standing customer, ThyssenKrupp Steel, and that was to collaborate on the developing of new pathways for the decarbonisation of steelmaking. So steelmaking being one of the hardest to abate industries, we have a couple of products that, as you know, go into steelmaking, very high-quality products. But we are also looking for ways to completely decarbonise steel. We're looking to do that in collaboration with our downstream partners that are like-minded in the way that we think about things. And these collaborations, generally focus on joint research to accelerate not only the development of high-quality feedstock for low-carbon steel, but also to build on similar partnerships that we've formed with other long-standing steel customers like Salzgitter and Nippon Steel. So another area that we'll be able to talk about soon is enhancing our existing approach to assessing and mitigating the risks associated with climate change and the resilience that such an approach will bring to the existing portfolio, our future portfolio, and will not only be important for our own operations, but also key points in our value chains and especially for our host communities. Like many, many other companies, we are being asked quite regularly now whether our emissions reduction targets are ambitious enough. And as many have put it, to me, say, are you aligned with Paris? Now, this is a more difficult question to answer than I think it might seem, because, as far as we can tell, there's no agreed way yet to assess whether the targets are aligned to pathways constraining global temperature increase to only 1.5 degrees C, and not even a single consensus definition of what this or alignment to Paris actually means. So firstly, the context here. So we set our current Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions of an absolute 30% reduction by 2030, as I said a little earlier, of our 2016 base back in 2018. So at that stage, I think the target was absolutely sector-leading, very ambitious. And we also knew that our emissions would rise in the years immediately after 2016. So that was due to production growth outpacing the rate at which we were able to effect emissions reductions in the short run. And that really means that our reduction from the peak emissions that we measured in 2019 down to 2030 is actually 45%. So that is very ambitious, I would say. And with that context, and to assess our level of ambition, we then undertook an even further detailed internal review. And then after we'd done that, we went external and said, can we be sure that we understand that this is the right work. It is heading us in the right direction. And we took a third-party verification from the Carbon Trust. So this review compared the emissions reduction that we were targeting between 2020 and 2030 to the many 1.5 degrees C pathways that have been defined by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And the combination of our internal analysis and the independent gap assessment, I think now gives the group confidence that our Scope 1 and Scope 2 trajectory are aligned with a well below 2 degree scenario, and broadly are in the range of a 1.5 degree C world. So beyond 2030, our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions target of carbon neutrality by 2040 is absolutely now well within the range of Paris-aligned scenarios that are out there today. The purchased electricity is clearly one of the biggest issues that we need to deal with. And we already have contracts in place across our South America operations, meaning that half of the group's electricity supply is now already coming from renewable sources. The solution for Southern Africa is actually quite different, right? I mean, the fact is that renewable capacity just doesn't exist in Southern Africa. It's not a matter of clever contracting. It's not a matter of swapping contracts with one energy provider for another energy provider and working out what the value equation in that is. This is actually about creating a capacity that doesn't exist. And to do that, the creation of Envusa Energy, which is our next step towards a renewable energy ecosystem. And I think you have to think about this in the context of ecosystems when you're thinking this broadly across the whole of Southern Africa, where we aim now to end up producing energy, clean energy, at a rate of 3 to 5 gigawatts. So that's pretty big, which will both enhance the stability of the grid in South Africa and at very least, if not add capacity to that grid, replace some of the energy on that grid with more sustainable sources of energy. And we expect that this investment is going to be funded by a number of equity partners and debt financing, which would be typical, I think, for high-quality infrastructure projects of this type. The first wave of these projects is to deliver 600 megawatts, and they are almost shovel-ready. We would expect that construction would begin on those very early next year. It's certainly not a process that we can do all on our own. It really does need effective collaboration and partnership across businesses and with government to drive the scale and magnitude of change. And our work in South Africa, I think, certainly does demonstrate this. We are working to support South Africa's NDC climate goals, and specifically, these goals state the need for public-private partnerships. 18 months ago, the public policy space was very, very different in South Africa, and our ability to actually build the type of renewable capacity that we're looking at was absolutely impossible. But through the constructive and deliberative engagement that we've had with various stakeholders, but specifically with the government of South Africa, I think we can now see the way that the landscape has changed, and it enables us to create these solutions, not just to solve our own carbon emissions conundrum, but along with other changes in the stakeholder expectations has now taken us to a very, very different place and allows us to have these partnerships where actually we can create more change that solve not only ours, but some of our other stakeholders, particularly our community's issues as well. Finally, on diesel, so the second component of what it takes to decarbonize internally. So on diesel emissions, you've heard from us quite a few times about the work on developing a hydrogen-powered truck. We announced a few months ago this non-binding agreement to bring together NewGen with First Mode. So First Mode was our technology and engineering technology partner on NewGen. And we brought ourselves together in a new combined business. The idea here is to accelerate the development and the commercialization of this technology. And that includes potentially applications beyond the scope of mining. So, when we developed this drivetrain, it became eminently clear to us that this didn't just need to be in big trucks. There was entirely a world on rail, for example, where this could play. And so why not create an entity that would bring all of these interested parties together, allow them to co-invest, drive scale more rapidly, and then ultimately support a much greater decarbonisation objective that we're pretty sure is going to benefit from the potential of this clean technology. So it also means that we don't just need to do this on our balance sheet. And the idea that we can get to scale much more quickly in a much more leveraged way is what we're aiming at here. So if we assume that we progress as we envisage to do at this point in time, we would expect to replace our global fleet, which is currently around about 400 trucks, starting towards the end of this decade, over the following decade. So that's a really rapid expansion of a technology or a technological solution that just 3 years ago didn't exist at all. This is just a quick snapshot view of the shape of the portfolio as it stands today. And I really do believe that the vast majority of our portfolio is now what we would call future, consisting of future enabling products. And those are the metals and the minerals that are needed to enable the future that we're all aiming for as society. So our portfolio now exposes us to the major long-term demand themes, primarily cleaner, greener, more sustainable world through a growing global population that clearly need homes, transport, food, and a decent quality of life. And all of our products in this portfolio play a role in that world and in a transition to that world.